So we've all had those conversations at the kitchen table with our friends. You know the one that starts with, I wonder what would happen if, or wouldn't it be great if? Well, now imagine if we actually did something with those ideas. My name's Una Begley, and I'm going to talk today about what volunteering with First Fortnight, Ireland's mental health arts charity, has taught me. I've learned 4 main lessons about the strength of volunteers who aim to act on those kitchen table ideas to have a positive impact on social behaviours and how they can make their volunteering even more effective. And those 4 lessons are: voluntary does not mean amateur, volunteers are the social change makers, the individual volunteers are as important as the organisation they volunteer with, and there's strength in numbers, but sometimes a few will do. I volunteer with First Fortnight, which was born of a conversation between 2 friends at a kitchen table in a semi-detached house in Tallaght, Dublin. Now, I wasn't one of the 2 people at that table, unfortunately, so I can't claim credit. The 2 friends in question were the charity's founders, JP Swain and David Keegan. First Fortnight is an organisation that aims to reduce mental health stigma through the arts and cultural action. It's run almost entirely by volunteers. It consists of a mental health themed arts festival that runs each January, in addition to being a service provider with a professional year-round creative therapy service that provides free art and music therapy to people experiencing mental ill health and who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. The festival itself aims to capture that buzz that happens in an audience at the end of a creative or cultural event, whether that's music, theatre, film, spoken word, dance, sports events, and focus that energy and discussion in one particular direction onto one particular topic, specifically mental health. And where do I fit into all this? Well, I'm one of the volunteers who helped to make First Fortnight happen. I should probably point out that until 4 years ago, I'd never volunteered in my life. My world didn't expand that far beyond myself, my friends and my family, and the occasional donation of money to one cause or another, or to someone I saw living on the streets. I loved live music, and I enjoyed going to gigs and music festivals when I wasn't working in my full-time job as a speech and language therapist. I was also one of those people who rarely acted on those "I wonder what would happen if," or "wouldn't it be great if" ideas, presuming that someone else could do them better, or just being too lazy to put them into action. But over the last 4 years, I've learned so much about the real tangible change that we can all make to the world through volunteering, and I'm going to share some of that learning with you as I tell my story. I came across First Fortnight in 2011. 1 year after its inaugural event, as an avid gig goer who wanted to see a band who happened to be playing at First Fortnight's flagship finale gig. If I'm honest, I wasn't aware it was a charity event until I was there, when the conversation about mental health was triggered in a gentle way through the use of brief speeches, audio visuals, and the bands themselves talking about why they wanted to be involved in First Fortnight and its mental health stigma reduction aims. The fact that the event was run by volunteers wasn't apparent in any aspect of the night, and it competed favourably with any professional gig I'd ever attended. The idea that volunteers could come together to stage large-scale, high-quality events astounded me. And looking back, it was at this point that I learned that first volunteering lesson. Voluntary does not mean amateur. I realised that night that First Fortnight's volunteers were staging events to engage festival participants in frank discussion about mental health in a stigma-free space. The idea that destigmatising mental health could be as easy as staging an arts or cultural event surprised me, but the conversations I heard that night were unlike any I had heard in their openness and honesty. But in order to be taken seriously, those events need to be of a high enough quality to have an impact. And low-quality events risk having an even more stigmatising effect. So as volunteers, we need to aim as high as possible. In the 2 years after I discovered First Fortnight, I went through periods of being mentally unhealthy. And I was surprised at how hard I found it to reach out for support or to talk to anyone in my life about how I was feeling. In a reversal of how First Fortnight was born of a kitchen table conversation, my involvement was born of my complete inability to talk to the people I cared about what I was going through. My self-confidence nosedived, and my negative self-talk reached a point where it was impacting daily on my self-esteem. Each January, I went to more and more First Fortnight music, theatre, film, and spoken word events, finding strength in their easy openness about all things mental health. And by talking to people about my attendance at these events, I was able to open the conversations that I needed to have, but that I was struggling to find the words for. By talking to people about the events I was going to, I was actually able to talk about what I was going through. In 2014, as a result of that direct personal effect of attending First Fortnight events in those previous 2 years, I volunteered for the festival for the first time. It was at this point that I learned my second volunteering lesson. Volunteers are the social change makers. Although the tasks I was given were fairly easy, I realised that I had a far-reaching role across the festival as a visible representative of First Fortnight. By showing a willingness to engage with audience members in conversations about mental health, I was setting the tone for those First Fortnight events. And my role as a volunteer actually went far further. I learned from volunteering with First Fortnight to go on as an advocate for mental health stigma reduction through all facets of my life, by my behaviours when mental health is on the table. Volunteering in a real way changed me and how I interact with the world. And the fact that I'm a volunteer and not an activist is also an important point. Research has shown that individuals can resist social change due to negative stereotypes about activists, regardless of the domain of activism, viewing them as militant and eccentric. But as a volunteer, I'm the colleague, friend, family member, peer, who just happens to be volunteering with a mental health arts charity and trying to demonstrate destigmatizing behaviours. That first year, I also learned my first lesson, my third lesson, that individual volunteers are as important as the organisation they volunteer with. First Fortnight gets its share of media and social media coverage, and its upcoming 2018 festival has an expected audience of over 8,000 people. But one of the most significant and far-reaching effects of my volunteering role is the trickle-down effect. I've created countless opportunities to talk about mental health through my discussion of my involvement with the organisation. I've had conversations with friends, family, colleagues, and even strangers that I wouldn't have had if it wasn't for First Fortnight. I've been told things and I've shared things that I never would have had the opportunity to otherwise. If I'm honest, at the end of that festival in January 2014, I thought my involvement in the organisation was over. If I had time, I planned to volunteer again for the following year's festival, but I'd largely forgotten about First Fortnight when I was approached in April 2014 to get involved as a volunteer fundraiser. In the space of a year, I went from volunteering with the festival for the first time to becoming a fundraiser to taking on the festival volunteer coordination role, all as a volunteer myself. It was as part of this coordination role that I learned my fourth volunteering lesson. There's strength in numbers, but sometimes a few will do. The festival volunteer group has grown from about 50 in the first year that I volunteered to about 150 in January 2017. Trying to wrangle a group of that size as a volunteer myself was no easy feat, but I've loved it. And over the last 3 years have managed to develop a successful festival volunteer coordination system that I'm now handing on to others to manage. I've put in place induction for them, including suicide awareness safe talk training, to empower the volunteers for the festival. And I always remember how I felt when I volunteered for the first time and the nerves that went with it. It was a bit like that feeling on the first day of school when you walk into class and you don't know anyone. And in my development of the coordinator role, I've tried to remember that feeling because it reminds me how important it is for volunteers to feel part of a cohesive group. Our volunteers are very diverse, from those who just like volunteering with arts festivals, to those with personal experience of mental ill health, to those who just want to support the first fortnight's mental health stigma reduction aim. But it's very important for them to feel a sense of camaraderie and belonging. I've seen the strength of that larger volunteer group in the friendships that form and the fun they have while they're fulfilling their festival roles. But when I say sometimes a few will do, I'm talking about us volunteers who work throughout the year on the running of the organisation and the programming of the festival. I'm involved in fundraising, volunteer coordination, as I've mentioned, and since 2015 as a volunteer member of the board of directors of the charity. There's about 20 of us who come together, usually weekly, to work on fundraising, communications, marketing, web development, and the programming of the festival, which for January 2018 has seen the festival grow to over 100 events across 17 counties in Ireland. We come from a range of backgrounds, some in mental health, some in the arts, some like myself working in unrelated fields. And this group needs to have a smaller, more focused number so that tasks can be completed and decisions made. I remember talking to one of the festival volunteers about this smaller group as volunteers, and he said, "You're not really volunteers." And at the time, I didn't understand what he meant, and if I'm honest, I kind of took offence at his statement, but I think I do understand what he means now. We do fulfill a different role to the festival volunteers who volunteer over a short but intense period of time. I do see my role as a more long-term, public-spirited effort, and we all commit significant amounts of time to it. But it is still done on a voluntary basis, and without it, the charity would have been unable to develop. We've come a long way. The conversation about mental health and ill health in Ireland has begun. But just as First Fortnight began as a kitchen table conversation, until the conversation about mental health is a safe conversation to have at kitchen tables across Ireland, across Europe, and around the world, then the need to push for social change and stigma reduction will continue. I don't know about you, but I used to be one of those people that when I found myself saying, "I wonder what would happen if," or "wouldn't it be great if," I was guilty of leaving those thoughts there at the kitchen table with the dirty cups and moving on without ever doing anything about the idea. But now I think about what would have happened if those two lads had done that. First Fortnight wouldn't exist and wouldn't be making a meaningful change to mental health stigma reduction in this country. And from a selfish point of view, if they hadn't acted on their idea and founded First Fortnight, then I wouldn't be on this stage today talking to you about volunteering. It's here I'm going to sneak in a bonus fifth lesson that I've learned from volunteering. You will always gain more from volunteering than you put in. It might sound grandiose, but volunteering has changed my life. It's given me a great group of friends. It's challenged me to do things outside of my comfort zone. It's helped me to develop my skills and to do things that I perceive to be outside of my skill set. It's given me back my self-confidence, and it's helped me to act on those kitchen table conversations like, I wonder what would happen if I applied to be a TEDx speaker. So if you have one of those kitchen table light bulb moments, do something with the idea and find the people who can help you to make it happen, just like First Fortnight's founders did. Because with people donating their time, skills, and effort as volunteers, it's truly humbling what you can achieve. So don't expect someone else to do it. Get up from the kitchen table and make it happen. Thank you.